It's a simple enough question, and it did for Joe Biden. Is Donald Trump losing the plot? Are there signs of cognitive decline in some of his recent performances? Or is that just, as he might call it, yet more fake news? The vice president's critics, meanwhile, say she is going to lose this, and she's going to do so primarily because she is just way outside the American mainstream on a whole range of issues. 3 weeks to go, and still a great deal to discuss on Talking Politics USA. Welcome to the programme. I'm joined as ever by our Washington correspondent Dan, former advisor to both Presidents Biden and Obama, Adam Hodge, and ex-Trump administration official Heather Nauert. Now, when it comes to Donald Trump, he's no stranger to some slightly rambling speeches of late, but on stage in Pennsylvania this week, we did see something quite different. Take a listen to this.
Let's not do any more questions. Let's just listen to music. Let's make it into a music. Who the hell wants to hear questions, right? Put on Pavarotti singing Ave Maria. Nice and loud. Turn it up louder. We want a little action here. Turn it up louder. So play YMCA. Go ahead. Let's go. Nice and loud.
Here we go, everybody.
Nobody's leaving. What's going on? There's nobody leaving. Keep going. Keep going. Should we keep going? All right, turn that music up. Turn it up. Great song.
So if you aren't sure quite what happened there, we should explain. Trump decided to stop answering questions at the event and instead asked for a playlist of all his favourite songs. We should also point out there was a medical emergency, in fact, 2 medical emergencies in the crowd, and those were dealt with. That's part of the reason for playing the music. However, it's led to lots of criticism. Is it fair? Is it not fair? Is there anything in it? Heather, I feel like we should start with you because I'm guessing you think all the criticism is a load of absolute cobblers.
Look, at Trump's rallies run multiple hours. There are lots of candidates who come on stage and speak. People are there for quite a while, so they play music throughout these rallies. It's not uncommon for them to do that. I think he's just having fun and playing to his audience. They like to get up and move around a little bit, and so that's fine. They discuss the substance. He gives a long, lengthy policy remarks, and so people hear all about the policy, but why not have a little bit of fun at the same time? So I think it's much to do about nothing.
One of the points I just wanted to ask you, because it's something you've said to us over the past few weeks, is that you don't think enough people in Britain clearly understand how far you would regard Vice President Harris's views as being significantly outside the American mainstream. Can you just explain that to us?
Sure. So I don't want people to be completely surprised if this does not go in the direction which they want. This race is neck and neck right now. The polls have really tightened. However, a month ago, Harris was 5 points ahead Trump in the national polls, and now they're at a dead tie. And then, of course, all the key battleground states we spent a lot of time talking about have really tightened up as well. Trump may very well pull this out. And part of the reason, if he does, is because Kamala Harris and many of the Democrats right now who are running the party are really outside the mainstream. She just said yesterday, talking about wanting to study the idea of reparations, meaning paying Black Americans and their ancestors for slavery. On Columbus Day here in the United States, where we celebrate Christopher Columbus, it's now called Indigenous Persons Day. She talked about basically how awful colonists were, and it was terrible for the colonists to have come into the United States and then colonized across the nation. Those are just a few of the ideas and concepts that are really outside the mainstream here. Girls or boys playing in girls' sports and competing against them, children being able to have operations, physical operations, sex change operations, if you will, in some states without parental consent. All of those things are frustrating to Americans, plus the high cost of goods, plus a border that has pretty much been wide open for the past 4 years. So as folks think about what is happening here in the United States, do not discount those issues. They're big issues and concerns to a lot of American voters.
Adam, I'll put those to you in a moment, but just first, Dan, can I come to you to just talk about the last week or so? I don't really know what to make of watching Trump. Some things seem to be self-evidently true. He's always been a riffer, if we can put it like that. You go back to 2016, his rallies have always, that's one of the things people really like or liked and perhaps still do like about him is that he's unpredictable. He says things you don't predict. He doesn't stick to the script and all the rest of it. His speeches have seemed to get more rambling. I mean, do you think there's anything in this, it did for Joe Biden after all. Is there anything in this kind of question of cognitive decline, or in your view, I mean, you watch him more than most, is that all just rubbish?
Look, he's not in the same ballpark as Joe Biden in terms of losing his thread and serious questions about his cognitive abilities. But I think it will raise questions for some people about his judgment. When he was playing music and swaying on stage, we're 21 days out from an election, which is neck and neck. You would think he would take that opportunity to ram home the message about the Biden-Harris's handling of the economy and how he can turn it around and do better. Instead, we had 40 minutes of basically dead air politically. And I think that will be one question that maybe his own campaign will be asking as well. Look, all right, you might be doing, you have a pretty good October so far, but this isn't in the bag yet. And surely you want to be driving home your message on key points on immigration and on the economy, rather than kind of enjoying this party. Yes, that's sort of part of his appeal, his unorthodox, relaxed, unpolitician-like demeanour. But I think that only goes so far. You can do a bit of that, but you've still got to land the points. And I think that maybe will have people worrying, A, about his judgment, B, who is around him, his team. Why wasn't someone just going, enough of the music already, let's get back to the politics? And also, just about how focused he is, how much he can concentrate. Is this someone you want in the Oval Office in a crisis?
Adam, can I put Heather's points to you? Is it not the case that on quite a lot of issues, Kamala Harris is just outside probably the American mainstream, and that is a problem for her and could be telling on election day? Do you worry about that? Do you accept there is some justice in that, both in terms of things she said in the past, but also things she said in the present, as Heather was just outlining there?
No, I don't. I think that she's got a pretty mainstream view on a range of issues, right? I mean, we're talking about tax fairness. That's something that the vast majority of the public supports, making it easier for people to afford household goods like groceries and ending price gouging. Overwhelmingly popular, right? She's got a range of issues, including protecting women's reproductive freedom, widely popular across the country. Those are key issues that people are actually voting on. Heather ran through a list of issues that maybe a handful of people, I could probably count on one hand or two hands, people who are going to decide their vote based on recognizing Columbus Day anymore. Like, that's just not a top issue for people. I think the real question that people have is the judgment that of the two candidates, right? And the problem with Trump, and this gets back to what Dan was just saying, it's actually kind of indicative of what happened in 2016. Where Trump kind of went silent the last 3 weeks of the campaign. You just take the two events he had yesterday. One was a sit down with Bloomberg and talking about the economy, where he went on all kinds of tangents about tariffs and trade that would be damaging for the economy. He was better off just standing there for 40 minutes listening to music. He did less damage to his campaign talking about listening to music than he did talking about the issue. So I think that's where we are in this part of the campaign. We'll see how it unfolds over the final 20 days. Harris clearly has a vision she's going to run on.
But the issue surely is that it's still incredibly close. There are still tens of millions of Americans who fully intend to go out and vote for Donald Trump. That has to be for a reason. We continue to, apply conventional narratives to Donald Trump. And there are, we would argue, I'm sure, that there are places like the whole question about the last election, January the 6th, and all the rest of it, where that's perfectly justified. But when it comes to his unconventional ways of speaking, his unconventional rallies and all the rest of it, maybe arguably he does know something that we don't, because his vote is holding up. Would you not accept that there are very good reasons why tens of millions of Americans still seem absolutely intent on going out to vote for Donald Trump?
Absolutely. I don't think it's, we've should have all learned our lesson. Like, his unconventional approach clearly has inspired tens of millions of people to vote for him. I just think it's the wrong way to go, and I disagree with his approach. But there's no question he has a grip on a segment of the country, and he intends to try to get those people out to vote. I think what will be key in the next couple of days is who's actually able to break through in the final days. And you've seen the Harris campaign looking to try to expand with Republican voters in some of these key states. She's doing events. She's going on Fox News today. She's doing events with former Trump administration officials, trying to help speak to and broaden the base, while she's also attending to Black men and Black voters in some of these key swing states. She's trying to spread and broaden the coalition. That's how she gets to try to get ahead of Trump. Because if you just try to run the same playbook that we tried in 2016 or 2020, I don't think that's a recipe for success. I think that's why you're seeing them try to broaden the map and broaden the playing field. And we'll see how they who's right in 20 days.
Okay, well, with 3 weeks to go until the election, early voting has started. And in the key swing state of Georgia, there was a record turnout for early ballots. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris has continued to try and court the votes of Black men, a group she really does need to win over. But what are the polls saying? Heather, maybe I can begin with you again. Do you read anything at all into the very large amount of early voting in Georgia? I mean, last time was the pandemic. I've listened to so many people talking about early voting. I must admit, I come away from it unconvinced that it means anything at all, I have to say. We do see the polls tightening. You mentioned that earlier, not all of them, but some of them. The New York Times, I see, has basically now officially declared it a tied race. And that. What do you make of the runes that are to be read at this point?
Well, I think early voting is important. Democrats, by and large, have done a much better job of communicating that fact to their voters than Republicans have. Republicans have started to come around on it. Now you'll hear President Trump talk about it and others about the importance of really, pardon me, banking your votes before election day, because a lot can happen that could prevent someone from getting to the polls. And so Republicans are a little slower at adopting this strategy, but now they're coming on board. But let's take a look at one important state, Pennsylvania, for example. In Pennsylvania, they've had 297,000 mail-in ballots that have been returned from Democrats, but just 91,000 Republicans so far. That's as of 2 days ago. So you see that this has been something that the Democrats have really pushed all along. Important for them to do so. Republicans have to get on the same page. So everybody should get out and vote as early as they can, because who knows what can happen on election day.
Dan, any thoughts on early voting and the polls and whether it's telling us anything?
I think it's really, really difficult to say, Tom, as you said. I mean, one thing's for certain: people are passionate about this election. I don't think apathy is going to be an issue in this election in the way that we've seen it in some elections in the UK in past years. You know, everyone knows how much is at stake in this election. You know, irrespective of which side of the political divide they're on. We had the whole kind of thing with COVID last time. You know, we've had changes to the rules on mail-in ballots and so on. So I think perhaps there's some explanation as to why there are much more people early voting this time around. But I'm not sure. I haven't managed to divine, the same as you, really, any particular kind of political runes from this, which would say, well, that means definitely that Kamala Harris is going to win this election or Donald Trump is going to win. It seems like we're going to have to wait not only until the day of the election on November the 5th, but quite conceivably for several days, maybe several weeks afterwards, until we get the final result.
Adam, what do you make of the early voting in Georgia in particular, the massive turnout, the tightening of the polls? What is there to be read into this? Anything, do you think?
I think it's no secret that Republican officials in Georgia have tried to learn the lesson from 2020. And I think some of the numbers may be indicating that more Republicans may be coming out to vote. But I generally agree with both Heather and Dan. It's a little too early to tell kind of where these votes are coming from and what the numbers are. I think it is important for both campaigns to try to get as many voters out before Election Day so that they can focus their Election Day resources on actually driving and turnout in some of these key areas. And so that's where I know the Harris campaign is focused on. That's what when I talk to them, they're very clear these next sort of 18 days or so are key to try to bank as many votes as possible in all of the swing states to try to then so you have a better sense of what your goals are for the last sort of 72 hours of the get out the vote, or GOTV as we call it here in the States.
Heather, can I just ask you one more question? We keep reading that Trump is doing particularly well with some groups, like Latino, particularly male Latino voters. Do you think that's just about the economy? When you look at the kind of the crosstabs, as people call it, the data behind the polling, the way different groups appear to be trending, what do you read into that in terms of the reasons why you think that might be?
I think it's really twofold. Two issues play into that. One, the economy, inflation. And by the way, nobody buys it that inflation is high, that grocery prices are high because it's the grocery store's fault. No one buys that here. So that's one issue, just overall cost. Second issue is immigration. And we have a huge population of immigrants here in the United States, legal immigrants who came here through the proper channels and did things as they would explain in the right way. So a lot of those voters have a real problem with people who go around the rules and come here illegally, and then in some cases kind of kick them out of their homes and kind of take over, as it's been described to me by certain Latino voters. So I think that really points out the concern that Latino voters have and why they might be leaning more toward President Trump than Vice President Harris. They're concerned about those very issues. They want to have immigration, Americans support immigration, but they want to make sure that people go through the proper channels and do it the right way.
Okay, next, the election must be getting close when you start to see familiar faces popping up on the campaign trail. Have a listen to some of these recognizable voices.
Don't be fooled. Just bear down. Have a good time.
Yes, we will.
Look for somebody in a MAGA cap to take a picture with. But don't forget, they'll be better off if you win. And you won't be better off if they win.
I'm speaking to men directly. Part of it makes me think that, well, you just aren't feeling the idea of having a woman as president. And you're coming up with other alternatives and other reasons for that.
She beat Trump so badly in the debate, he's scared to death to meet her again. That's a fact. Tough guy, right? Tough guy. Because he knows he'd lose again. That's a fact. He is a loser.
Okay, Dan, big star power there. Two living presidents not campaigning. Jimmy Carter, obviously, because he's very, very unwell, though I did see that he managed to get out to vote for Harris. George W. Bush, notably absent. We can maybe talk about that. But Dan, what do you make of this? Does it make any difference at all? Or does it kind of remind Americans in a way, one of the reasons we like Trump is he wasn't any of those guys. Does it make a difference?
Oh, I think having your big guns like Barack Obama out on the trail inevitably must help. I mean, he still has real star power, and so, to a lesser degree, do the likes of Bill Clinton as well. So I think it helps. I think the question perhaps I'd like to ask Adam is why they haven't come out sooner and more fulsomely, on the trail. They have been around, but we, I think that it's definitely ramping up. I wonder if they've left it a bit late. Given the state of the polls, given how tight this is that a miscalculation maybe on the Democratic Party?
Adam, you want to pick that up, and also maybe you could just talk about how much difference you do or don't think it makes.
Yeah, I think it is certainly the more you can have Barack Obama out on the road stumping for you, the better. And so I think it's always trying to find the right balance between letting the vice president be her own candidate and not having Barack Obama overshadow her because he is still a huge voice, a huge player in American politics. I think that it is helpful across the board to have, you think about it, in one day in the campaign, you can have the vice president in Pennsylvania, Barack Obama in Michigan, Bill Clinton in Georgia, you can have Joe Biden in Pennsylvania, you can have a bunch of other great governors across the state fanning out on behalf of the campaign. real superstars who can help drive turnout. I think that is what the campaign is hoping they can bank on, in addition to their superior ground game in the final 20 days of the campaign. I thought it was also important that Barack Obama was speaking to Black men in Michigan, and it's something that I think you'll see him focus on for the rest of the campaign. It's coupled with the vice president coming out with a specific agenda for Black voters. I think, one thing that Black men in particular are conscious of feel like their vote is taken for granted, or that people are just coming at them at election day. Candidly, it would have been nice, I think, to see a little bit more of that from the vice president's team earlier on in the campaign, but they got 20 days to drive home the message, and let's hope that that's what they do effectively. And I think having Barack Obama and Vice President Harris out there driving it is really, really important. Her interview with Charlemagne the God, a very popular radio host in the U.S., is another example of how they're trying to reach people where they are and use creative ways to actually do so.
Heather, the whole point of Trump is he isn't any of those guys, right? Does it make a difference having them out on the stump against him?
I think the problem, it's important to always have your surrogates out, especially ones with a lot of star power, as you correctly point out. But the problem is you don't always know what you're going to get when you bring out a high-powered surrogate. Bill Clinton talked about the death of a young woman by an illegal immigrant. That has raised new attention when Bill Clinton basically said that kind of stuff didn't happen when he was president, something to that effect, and that we should be more careful about who we let into the country, really highlighting the fact that we have a wide open border. And then President Obama, very effective spokesman, but when he goes to talk to Black male voters and tells them that they are misogynists if they don't vote for a woman, that really has a repelling effect. As I talked to several Black male small business voters yesterday, they said that very thing, that they were offended that President Obama was trying to tell them how they should vote and that they don't like women if they don't vote for Harris. So I think that's one of the reasons that you're seeing Trump do better with the African American vote this time around. This year so far, he has about 16%. He's still, significantly behind Harris, but getting 16% of the vote, whereas in 2016, he had 7% of the Black vote. So the Black vote has just been increasing with Republicans, and that has to be of great concern to Democrats right now.
Adam, I'll come back to you in just a second, but Heather, can I ask you, where is George W. Bush, and does it matter that I assume he is not going to come out and endorse Donald Trump?
Yeah, I don't think he'll come out and endorse Trump. He's been quiet really since he retired. He doesn't weigh in on a lot of the big international debates, whether it's Israel, Gaza, Ukraine, Russia. You see him staying quiet. I think it's no secret that he's no supporter of President Trump's, and so I think he's just going to probably stay quiet just as he is. But I don't think it matters for the overall vote anyway.
Yeah, Adam, sorry, you wanted to get in.
No, I think Heather actually spoke to an important point. I think where this election may ultimately come down to is who's able to eat into the other person's historical advantages. And so does Harris run up a huge margin among college-educated women voters who have traditionally kind of supported the Republican ticket? Does she blow it out with those voters, or can Trump eat into some of Harris's margin with black men? Or is there an overwhelming turnout from Black women to support Kamala Harris in numbers that we haven't seen before, or that are closer to the numbers that Barack Obama got in 2008? Again, in 2008, Black women were overwhelmingly supportive of Barack Obama. Black men, not quite as, the number of votes weren't quite as high. And so I think that's where we'll see the election that could hinge on that sort of breakdown. And that's why I think the campaigns will try to speak to those communities over the next 20 days. They're going to leave no stone unturned, that's for sure.
Dan, 3 weeks to go. You're out on the road a lot, speaking to many voters. What are your thoughts as we go into these final 3 weeks?
Look, I mean, if I was in Kamala Harris's campaign, I would be worried. I think this is much tighter than they anticipated at this stage, and I think it appears like it's, if anything, got a bit tighter in the last couple of weeks. Frankly, it is astonishing how close it is. I mean, this might end up being, I don't know, maybe one of the other two can correct me if I'm wrong, but probably one of the closest elections in recent memory. And given the kind of divisive nature of Donald Trump, that is pretty astonishing. You've got to remember, here's a man who's been convicted of 34 felony counts. He's been, found liable for sexual assault. He said, a lot of outrageous things, including today, talking about being the father of IVF. Make of that what you will. I'm not quite sure what he meant by that, but he's clearly trying to sort of regain some ground on the issue of abortion and the whole mess with the knock-on effects for IVF. And yet, it is completely neck and neck in all the places that count. It is really remarkable how close this is going to be. Unless the polls are completely wrong, this is going to come right down to the wire, and we may end up in a really nail-biting finish where we don't know the result, possibly for days or weeks after the day of the election.
I said we needed to wind up, but I can't resist coming back to you, Adam and Heather. Adam, maybe you first on the subject of polling. Like, the polls have been, last two elections have been 4 points out. I have had this long worry about, as a sort of somebody who's covered politics my whole career, about polling. I mean, polling determines so much of how we cover an election. And fundamentally, it seems to me, we have no idea who's winning this election. It might not be close. It could be Donald Trump wins comfortably. It could be Kamala Harris wins comfortably. Adam, what do you think of that? I mean, are polls just a pain in the neck?
Well, sure. Yeah. I mean, but you have to remember what polls are. They're an assumption about what the makeup of the electorate will look like, but they're an assumption. They're not necessarily, different polls make different assumptions about what they think the makeup will be. I can tell you from talking to the campaign in the last couple of days, they have reiterated that they have always said this is going to be a close race. They have not bought into the hype that somehow she was coasting to victory. They believe, then they know, as especially a Black woman in America running to be the first female president of the United States, they cannot take anything for granted. They do not think this is going to be easy. They are fully convinced that they are the underdog in the race. And you look at America's history, there's a reason to be confident that in that assessment. But they know that they've got the ground game. They think they can to come back and win this thing. And that's what they're going to focus on over the next 20 days.
Heather, final word to you.
Yeah, and on the Trump side, they know it's not going to be easy either. So they're going to just fight it until the very end and continue to ask for every vote possible. In terms of polls, I think fewer Americans are confident in polls these days. And fewer Americans, I think, want to actually participate, in large part because they don't trust our institutions overall, whether it's a pollster calling, whether it is some of our government agencies and departments. There's less trust in that, and in the media as well, according to recent polls, including Gallup. So I think the polls are getting a little bit iffy, but nevertheless, it's an exciting one to watch, and we'll see what happens in just a few weeks.
Exciting it is. So good to talk to all three of you as ever. Thank you very much indeed. That's all we got time for today. We will be back with more next week. But for now, thank you very much, whether you were listening or watching. Thank you very much for investing your time with us. Goodbye.